Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Um, so we are from group 3 and right now we want to talk about a novel entitled A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and right now we want to talk about a specific theme, like the theme is social injustice and class struggle. Okay. So this is our group member. Our group member is Natasha Cindy, Tiara Gayatri, Savana Haifa, Tesalonika, Sabita Faza, and Anissa Fitria. Okay, next.
Today we will be exploring the theme of social injustice and class struggle in a novel, A Tale of Two Cities. In our presentation, uh, we uh, deeper, deepen the understanding about what Charles Dickens used this novel to reveal the severe divide between the wealthy aristocracy and the suffering lower class in 18th century France. This intense inequality eventually leads to the anger that sparks the French Revolution. And in our presentation, we'll provide some specific scenes that represent this theme, showing how Dickens highlights the harsh reality of a society lacking justice and fairness, and how the story brings out the urgent need for change and equality.
So okay, for the next is I want to talk about the theme social injustice and class struggle from chapter 1 entitled The Road to Paris. So the novel opens by describing France and England before the Revolution and its highlight contrasting wealth and poverty, peace and violence, and showing a society divided between suffering poor and ignorant wealthy elites. So for the evidence, there's evidence like, but in France, things were bad and getting worse. The people were poor, hungry, unhappy, and the king made paper money and spent it, and the people had nothing to eat. So the next is from chapter 2, A Wine Shop in Paris. So this chapter talks about the miserable social conditions and poverty in part of Paris called Saint Antoine. So for the evidence is, in the part of Paris called Saint Antoine, everyone was poor. The streets were narrow and dirty. The food shops were almost empty. The faces of the children looked old already because they were so hungry. Then we move to the chapter 3, A Trial in London 1780. So it's explained about the struggle of individuals who, despite their skills, remain stuck in lower social position, while those above gain wealth and status. So far, the evidence is Carlton knew that he was a clever lawyer and he was a good and an honest man, but he had never been successful himself. He drank too much, and his life was unhappy and friendless. His cleverness and his hard work in the law only made others like Mr. Shriver successful and rich. Okay, we move to chapter 4. To Sabita Plaza. Okay, next Sabita Plaza for chapter 4. So okay, maybe there's a trouble, so I will continue for chapter 4. The chapter 4 is the oppression of the French peasantry. So it's explained about the indifference and cruelty of the nobility exemplified by figures such as the Marquis of Evermonde. So for the evidence, when the Marquis carried, hits and kills a child on the street of Saint Antoine, but he shows no remorse. He cruelly threw a gold coin at the grieving father, Caspar, as if to compensate for the child's life. Then for chapter 5, maybe Sabita Faza. Okay, for chapter 5, the unrequited love and sacrifice. So it's explained about Charles Darnay's deep love for Lucy and Sidney Carton. Despite living a troubled life, also felt a deep love for Lucy, but their love stories are different. So Charles doesn't dare to declare his love. He preferred to sacrifice his love in order not to separate the father, Dr. Baum, while Carton still declares his feeling for Lucy, even though he knows that his love will not be reciprocated. And then the evidence from here is Darnay promised Turtle that he would never come between her and Lucy, saying, "You two will never be separated because of me." Mr. Carton's part is "Turn pride," said Sidney Carton. "I don't deserve your love, but you should know that for you, or for anyone close to you, I will do anything. Always remember that there are men who will sacrifice their lives to keep someone you love alive and close to you. Goodbye, Miss Manette." So for the next chapter is chapter 6 by Tiara Gayatri.
In chapter 6, it is discussed about the terrible condition of the commoners, the injustice of the people who had worked for the Marquis. They had terrible living conditions and weren't paid anything. The evidence is from the line, everything was old and tired and broken down. The people, the land, the houses, the animals.
So the next is chapter 8, Thessalonica.
So for the chapter 8 is in the hands of the citizens, the shift in power dynamics. This chapter marks a significant transition. The revolutionaries are now in power. Mirroring the oppressive behaviors of aristocracy they overthrew, this demonstrates how the cycle of violence and oppression continues, regardless of who holds the power. For the evidence is Charles Darnay, who just returns to France to help an old family servant, finds himself at the mercy of the new ruling class. Despite his good intentions and attempts to distance himself from the aristocratic heritage, he is treated with suspicion and hostility by the revolutionary citizens. After that, the arbitrary nature of revolutionary justice. The new regime's justice is portrayed as arbitrary and driven by the same kind of prejudice and violence that characterized the ancient regime. The revolutionary courts are not interested in fairness and individual guilt, but in collective punishment and retribution. For the evidence, Dernay is arrested despite having renounced his title and property, illustrating how justice under the revolution is indiscriminate and often unjust. The revolutionary zeal has led to a system where guilt by association and summary executions are common. For the next is chapter 9 about the spy, manipulation and espionage as tools of oppression. The character of John Barsad, who works as a spy, represents the ways in which ruling classes use manipulation and espionage to maintain control and suppress dissent. Barsad's actions highlight the pervasive distrust and the corrupt mechanism of control employed by the aristocracy and those aligned with them. For the evidence, who Bassard's dual role as a spy for both the English and French authorities underscores the pervasive atmosphere and surveillance and betrayal. He embodies the corrupt nature of the state apparatus that seeks to exploit and undermine both the aristocracy and the revolutionaries for personal gain. For the next is the exploitation of the lower classes. The lower classes are shown to be manipulated and exploited by those in power, including spies like Bassard, who feed on their misery and desperation. This reflects the broader theme of social injustice, where the poor are continually oppressed by various figures of authority. For the evidence, Bassard's willingness to switch allegiance and lack of genuine loyalty to any cause reveal how the poor and oppressed are often pawns in the hands of those who wield power. His interaction with characters like Jerry Cruncher and DeForges show how spies and informants exploit the vulnerabilities of the lower classes. And next is Brewing Revolutionary Sentiment. The chapter is also reflects the growing revolutionary sentiments among the lower classes, driven by the deep-seated grievances against the oppressive aristocracy. Characters the diverges represent the anger and desire for change that fuels the revolution. And for the evidence, the Deforgers plotting and the use of their wine shop as a hub of revolutionary activity highlight the organized efforts of oppressed to overthrow the ruling class. Madame Defarge's knitting, which encodes the name of those who will be executed, symbolized the meticulous and relentless nature of the revolutionary cause.
And the next is chapter 10 and 11. So chapter 10 and 11 of A Tale of Two Cities focus on them of class struggle and social injustice, especially through the backdrop of the French Revolution. While Charles Dickens used the chapters to illustrate the stark contrast between the aristocracy and the peasantry, he also shows how this injustice led to an inevitable uprising. Next. And for the evidence for chapter 10 is the substance of the shadow. So Dr. Manet's narrative reveals the cruelty and abuse inflicted by the Evermond family on common people. This account underscores the harsh treatment that the aristocracy inflicts on the lower classes, showing how the upper class exploits and disregards the welfare of the poor. And Dr. Manet's story also demonstrates how the aristocracy's unhacked power and lack of accountability lead to great suffering among the people, ultimately fueling the desire for revolution. And the evidence for chapter 11 is thus Dickens used foreshadowing to suggest the coming violence and retribution as the revolution approaches.
depicting a society on the verge of explosive change due to the long-standing oppression and inequality. The symbolism of thus represents the setting of the old unjust order and the dawning of a new one driven by the lower class demand for justice and equality. These chapters provide critical insight into Dickens' critique of social injustice, highlighting the oppressive systems that lead to rebellion and the consequences of disregarding the humanity of the lower classes.
Next to the chapter 12. In chapter 12, also highlighting about this theme by illustrating the social injustice of the time where the innocent are condemned for their family past wrongdoings. Innocent people also suffer the punishment of their families' past mistakes, even though they did not participate in the act, they were also getting punished. This point is proven by this scene. Charlie Darnay passed his last night alone in the prison. He had no hope. He knew he must die, not for anything he had done wrong, but for the crimes of his father and his uncle. And also, these pages illustrates the helplessness of the innocent lower class who are unfairly caught in the revolution world. It's proven by this scene there were many people there, some standing, some sitting, some walking about, some crying, most of them stood, silent, looking at the ground. I am innocent. What could a poor little thing like me do? I am not afraid to die. Citizen Ephraimond, but I have done nothing. Highlighting the disillusionment with the revolution, where even the innocent are sacrificed without truly benefiting the poor. It is proven by the line they say that the revolution will do so much good for the poor people, said the girl. How can my death help the poor? If it's true, I am willing to die, but I do not know how that can be. I heard that you were set free, citizen Evremonde. She went on, I hope it was true. Next. In the last chapter of this novel, also highlighting the theme by illustrate the intense anger of the working class toward the wealthy during the French Revolution, embodied in Madame Defarge's ruthless desire for revenge. Her action reveal how the revolution's pursuit of justice often turned into violence and retribution, punishing anyone linked to the nobility and blurring the line between justice and revenge. It is proven by the line, all her life she had been filled with hate. It was nothing to her that an innocent man was going to die because of his father's and his uncle's crimes.
All right, so maybe that's all from us. Hopefully, it will give you some new lesson about the story, the tale of two cities. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.